True Review is back at ya with another top 10 list. Assassin's Creed is a series that I tend to dive in and out of, and I've only recently been going back to it, so once again, naturally, it's time to talk about it for a little bit. But I don't know how many of you feel about this franchise, but it certainly had some fantastic ups, followed by some awful downs. So now that we have about 10 main games total-ish, I'll be putting them into a list from worst to best. And though there are certainly more than 10 Assassin's Creed games, I'll only allow games that have been released on either the home console or PC to qualify for this list. Also, no spin-off titles will be allowed on here, but character arc stories that were also intended as main entries into the series do count. You'll see what I mean later on in the video. Anyway, that's all for now, so let's get going with number 10. Assassin's Creed 3! So, starting out with the worst in the series, in my opinion, Assassin's Creed 3 attempted to be ambitious and tried to explore other areas that hadn't been done before, but 9 times out of 10 it failed to implement them correctly. Which was a shame because the game started off so well. The War of Independence was a great choice of setting, the initial character we got to play as was charismatic and fun, a good choice of weaponry from the time period, and an awesome plot twist to kick us off. But then we had to pretty much chuck all of that in return for an incredibly vanilla main character, huge chunks of the gameplay being set out in either the American frontier where not much happens, or at Homestead where you just have to deal with everyone else's shit, poor controls, and an overall story that just didn't feel anywhere near as good as the previous games. Naval missions were one of the redeeming features of that game, but it felt more like a gimmick that was over too quickly before we were forced to go back to shore and watch George Washington go mad for some reason. Oh, and Desmond's conclusion in the present was completely forgettable. Assassin's Creed Rogue. Hands down the laziest game in the series, Assassin's Creed Rogue might as well have been an add-on to Black Flag. As we'll see later on in this video, Black Flag did something right and was well received because of it. But Ubisoft seemed to want to keep the cash train going with the success that it had made in that game, and released Rogue, which was basically Black Flag all over again except for an inferior port. Port. And while the naval sections were still fun, practically everything else was not. The main character was unlikable, the story was forgettable, the assassination missions weren't even that good and made us feel less like an assassin and more like a drunken thug. You get to spend a bit of time outside the Animus again, which gives you the chance to learn a little bit more about Abstergo and the Templars, but nothing major, and you're not really missing much if you don't find every document. This game felt like a cash-in attempt and was mediocre because of it. Speaking of which, Assassin's Creed Revelations. This was the most blatant cash-in attempt, at least in my eyes. Assassin's Creed 2 introduced Ezio as a new protagonist, and most people took to him quite quickly. The game was then preceded by Brotherhood, which, though also had Ezio as the protagonist again, Brotherhood was still a pretty good game and was met with success as well. But I'm sure I spoke for everyone at the time after Brotherhood came out in that while that game was good, we'd all had enough of Ezio, so no more after this, okay? Let's have Assassin's Creed 3 already, and let's have a different character to follow. Oh, more Ezio again, huh? And this time he's an old man. Whoop-de-doo, Ubisoft! Can't wait to install this and play as an assassin OAP. I won't criticise the choice of setting because, again, Constantinople during the birth of the Ottoman Empire was a good pick, but this game didn't exactly turn up the action dial. All it added in was the stronghold mechanic, which wasn't a massive game changer anyway, and some new weapons that you got by without in previous games. I said this years ago on this channel, and I'm sticking to it. Assassin's Creed Revelations was Ubisoft's attempt at getting lunch money. Assassin's Creed Unity. I see Unity in the same way as Assassin's Creed 3, in that it was a missed opportunity. Paris and the French Revolution was an excellent choice of setting. Fighting and blood in the streets, people getting their heads cut off left, right and centre, some fantastic architecture to marvel over and then climb up and jump off just because you could. And the Knights Templar had very strong ties to France in real life, so this all had the makings of a great entry into the series. Unfortunately, most of these opportunities were then missed. Arno wasn't a bad main character, but there have been better. But putting the controversy over the female characters, or lack thereof, over to the side, I'm not getting involved in this one, thanks. Having the frame rates capped at 30 frames per second to make it look more cinematic was a terrible choice. Yes, I get that you were forced to do that on the console version so that you could render in huge crowds of people without the system dying, but thanks for dragging down the PC lot with you. Also, the story too. I like the direction of, well, the Templars might not be so bad, and maybe the Assassins aren't all that great, so where should you place your loyalties? But the rest of the game just seems to flirt between these two ideas. And like with all the previous games, nothing really gets resolved by the end of it, and you know that this battle is going to continue until present day. And finally, the co-op element felt phoned in. Next. Assassin's Creed 1. The first entry into the series was a gamble, but for the most part, I'd say it worked. The Holy Land was a great setting that you don't see often these days in gaming. It was a mixture of stealth and action that allowed you to decide when to use stealth or when to use action. And as this was the first in the series, it held a lot of promise for future titles and did well to let everyone know that this game was going to become a big thing in the next few years. There were drawbacks to this game, however, with combat being mostly centred around counterattacks, the fact that you couldn't swim, and where missions became very repetitive very quickly. A good first game with a lot of promise for future titles, but not the best in the series. Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Syndicate is kind of a middle-of-the-road game. It doesn't exactly get anything wrong, but then again it doesn't exactly try anything new. The jump from revolutionary Paris to Victorian industrial London isn't exactly a huge time leap, and while you can argue that these two settings are totally different, and I'm not here to argue that if we're talking about them in real life, in the Assassin's Creed series, there's not much change if I'm honest. Some factories and more squalor. Syndicate adds in a train, horse and carriages, which are annoying to control, a hookshot which renders free running obsolete. You know, that thing that made the previous game's maps fun to traverse. Don't want to climb the Houses of Parliament? Oh, hookshot. All done. And no longer does it feel like we're taking part in a centuries-old covert war against a powerful shadow group, but now it feels like we're just causing mischief. It's a Grand Theft Auto of the past. And meeting up with famous historical figures is just laughable at this point. One conversation with Alexander Bell involves him talking about how he's invented a device that lets you talk with people over long distances. But he hasn't quite thought up a name for it yet. To which you say, why not call it a telephone? Like it was you that coined the term and history should be thanking you for it. F*** off. Also, I'm pretty sure that Whitechapel isn't located in Shoreditch, but what do I know? Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I think for many of us, Brotherhood marks the last good Assassin's Creed game. Revelations and 3 have been discussed, and while we haven't got to Black Flag yet, there were still some Assassin's Creed related issues with that one. But Brotherhood was a bit of a gamble. The series was originally only going to be a trilogy, ending with Assassin's Creed 3, but after seeing the successes of Assassin's Creed 2, Ubisoft opted to continue Ezio's character arc with another entry into his story. You can really tell that they tried to go all out with this one, by taking every mechanic that was added in Assassin's Creed 2 and making it bigger, replacing the upgrading system of the small town of Monteregione with the entirety of Rome. You can also send out other assassins on missions around the globe, which would earn you rewards and stuff that you could then use for whatever reason. It wasn't a game changer, mind you, and you had no control over what happens during these missions, but it tried to add in another mechanic that ultimately required little effort on the player's part, but attempted to make you feel like you were at the head of the Assassin's Order. Assassin's Creed Origins. The most recent entry into the series comes in at number 3, mainly for trying to change up the formula a little, with it being set in ancient Egypt during the reign of the Ptolemies. Which hangs a question mark over, okay, so is this actually Assassin's Creed, or what? Because the Assassins were presumably established only a few generations before the Third Crusade, about 1,000 years later, but this is supposed to be a prequel and all, so what's going on? But fortunately, because this setting isn't used in that way often either, Origins does manage to paint quite a colourful and sometimes brutal picture of the time setting, allowing for a decent amount of immersion, or at least when the stealth mechanics aren't fucking themselves up. There's plenty to do and to get involved in, such as taking part in chariot races, and thanks to the nature of the setting, as well as how open and beautiful the scenery can be sometimes, treasure hunting feels more worthwhile than it has done in many of the franchise's past library. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. I think we can all agree, Black Flag was awesome. Video games are meant to be enjoyed, meant for our entertainment. And entertaining this game was. Set in the 1700s during the golden age of pirating, we get to take command of our very own pirate ship, go sailing around the Caribbean Sea, shooting, boarding, and forcing a surrender from any and all ships that go past, before stealing everything that they have on board. You could look for isolated islands, leave your ship and check for buried treasure, you could go deep sea diving for even more treasure, or you could anchor up at port and try your hands at looting a plantation. But you see, as much as I'll happily say that this game is awesome, there is an issue with it. You see, Assassin's Creed 4 is an amazing pirate game, but it's not a very good Assassin's Creed game. The Assassin's Creed part of it is very dull and forgettable, and most players just wanted to skip over that part because we wanted to get back to the open seas and continue on being a pirate. This game is often torn between people's number 1 favourite, second favourite, or joint favourite in the series, but it's usually because of the pirate section as to why it's so high on people's lists, rather than the Assassin's Creed side of it. Another one bites the dust. Another one bites the dust. Assassin's Creed 2. For me personally, this is the best one. This one had such a huge and rich setting, there's tons to do, so much to see, varied gameplay sections, an origin story that worked incredibly well, some likeable characters, both fictitious and real, good DLC for once, a satisfying campaign length, and many optional challenges that felt like they were worth undertaking. It was also one of the last games in the franchise that let us actually feel like we were taking part in a series of events that could quite literally change the world, where failure meant the enslavement of humanity at the hands of the Templars, and I don't think any game since then has managed to recapture that, even if only a little. Though this game was plagued by constant DRM at the start of its launch, this would eventually get taken away, leaving almost no bad to be found here. This game is still one of my favourite games of all time, and I feel it's a shame that future games in the series haven't been able to recapture the magic that Assassin's Creed 2 was able to show. But for that reason alone, Assassin's Creed 2 makes it in at number 1 on this list. And that's a wrap, but if you're constantly plagued by online DRM, like this video and all the usual shit. There's also Twitter where you can find out what video will be out next and when by searching for True Review, and I'm also on Patreon as well. But until next time, see ya!